Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished journalist, a social sector leader from Sao Paulo, Brazil, Mr. Marcel Gomes. Marcel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thank you. Marcel is the executive secretary of the NGO Repórter Brazil. He has been coordinating research on the social and environmental impacts of commodities supply chains and textile and garment production. In 2024, Marcel received the Goldman Environmental Prize for his work in South and Central America. Marcel, it's wonderful for me to be asking you questions when you, I'm sure, ask questions as a journalist. So it's nice to have you on the other side. But let me start by asking you, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Okay. As you said, I have I am the executive secretary of Repórter Brazil. It is an NGO based in São Paulo. I have been working for Repórter Brazil since 2008. I have academic background as well, with a degree in journalism and a master degree in political science, both from University of São Paulo. And I have a PhD as well on energy system planning from the Mechanical Engineering School at the State University of Campinas. And previously, I also worked for some mass media outlets in Brazil.
Wonderful, thank you. And what made you select, your focus on the social and environmental impacts of supply chains?
Yes, I think the main reason for that is that there is a lack in the big outlets, not only Brazil but international outlets, in the journalist covering of social and environmental issues. So you cannot find a lot of journalistic materials talking about the impacts of commodity supply chains, as I am based in Brazil, so I can see with my eyes the problems caused by the expansions of the commodity sector in the country. So I believe that is very important because commodities also, at the same time that they are important source of money for Brazil, but at the same time is causing environmental, social, labor impacts. It's very important that journalistic outlets speak about these topics.
Very well said. And Marcel, what are some of the most significant social issues you have observed in the commodity supply chains?
Yes, there are a diverse range of impacts related to social issues. In Brazil, we have, unfortunately, a lot of cases of modern slavery or forced slavery connected with the expansion of commodities. For example, in the cattle industry, in the soybean industry, in the coffee, or even the garment sector, federal inspectors, when they are doing inspections in the field, they still can find people in this situation. Also, child labor, particularly in the commodity sector, in the agriculture sector, it's common in certain areas of Brazil. And finally, I can mention problems related to labor. We have a good legal framework on labor issues in Brazil, but at the same time, I can see a lot of companies and farmers not complying with the labor legislation. And this is the source of a lot of labor abuses in the country.
Well said. And my next question, and I think you partly answered it, is how do labor practices in the textile and garment industries affect workers' lives in South and Central America?
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, I can say that garment industry, it's a very important industry for Brazil.
Yeah.
We produce, we have like a big industrial park for the production of garment products. Most of the production stay in Brazil. Well, like Brazil export only 5% of the production. So we are a big consumer market, right? But at the same time, what is interesting in this industry is that there are a strong migration from other countries to Brazil. For example, from Bolivia, from Paraguay, from Peru. And the workers that are coming to Brazil, many of them will be will be work for the garment industry. And many of them doesn't know well the legislation, the labor legislation, the labor law we have in Brazil. And we can see in the inspections of the federal inspectors that many of the people that is released from child labor or modern slavery are foreign people coming from these other countries.
Right, right. Well said. And given you said legislation is there, what in your view is the progress that has been made in improving labor conditions in the textile industry over the past few years?
Yes, because of the problems that have been raised by inspectors and civil society organizations and unions, I think there is a strong mobilization to solve those issues. In 2009, it was signed an agreement among companies, unions, civil society organizations in order to select some solutions for improving the labor conditions. For example, improving the monitoring of the supply chain. In Brazil, we have a lot of outsourcing in the garment sector. And some of companies decided to commit with this pact, with this agreement, in order to better monitoring the suppliers of garment products. So this is one of the relevant movements that happened more than 10 years ago. And I think it was able to change a little of the situations of the workers in the garment sector.
Well said. Can you also talk to me a little bit about some specific instances of human rights violations within the supply chains that you research?
Yes, it depends on the kind of commodities of supply chains. In the case of the cattle industry, which is a very important industry because the cattle is the origin not only of beef, but also the origin of biodiesel, because in Brazil we use the fat animal to produce biodiesel. Also is the source of leather for the garment industry and for the cars industry. So the cattle industry is the most relevant in terms of the incidence of modern slavery. Almost 35% of the case of modern slavery in the last 25 years are related to the expansions of the cattle industry. In the case of the agriculture in small farms, the incidence, the problem is more related to child labor. We have, a lot of small farming activities in Brazil. Many families engaged in the productions in a family farming way. And unfortunately, there is the use of children in the production of a diverse range of products, for example, potatoes,
Mm.
berries, lime. So this kind of food, unfortunately, is related to child labor in many places in Brazil.
Mm. And do you see any impact of gender when it comes to the textile and garment industry or some of the other supply chains?
Yes, it's an important topic for us because a major part of the workers in the garment sector are women, you know,
Mm.
not only Brazilian women, but also workers from other South America countries.
Mm.
Uh, and also, this is, of course, an important topic to be addressed by civil society organizations.
Mm.
But also what we can see is that in some industries, particularly in the sweatshops, there are families, not only the workers, but there are babies, there are children, because they live in the same place where they are producing garment
Mm.
products. So
Mm.
this is an issue. This gender aspect of the garment production is very important in Brazil.
Mm. One more question relating to the social impact, then I'll talk about some of the environmental impact. What measures, Marcel, can companies take to ensure fair labor practices within their supply chains?
Mhm. I believe it's very important to reduce the level of outsourcing. What we can see in Brazil is when companies they have their own workers hired, they are hiring the workers. It's much more difficult to find labor abuses.
Mm.
But uh, in general, garment industry, they have been outsourcing a lot the production of garment products.
Mm.
And I believe that even in that kind of model of production is possible to improve the labor conditions. For example, using a better monitoring system of the suppliers, even if they are outsourced. Other solution for me is the use of certifications. We have in Brazil some social environment certifications in the garment sector. I believe that it's an important tool that can be used particularly in supply chains where you have the outsourcing as a model of production.
Mm. Great response. Let's now talk a little bit about the environmental impact of the supply chains. What are some of the environmental concerns relating to the commodity supply chains?
Yeah. In Brazil, we have here in the country the major rainforest in the world, the Amazon forest.
Yeah.
And that forest has been impacted a lot in the last decades because of the expansion of agribusiness sector and the mineral sector as well. So particularly the cattle industry is going from the south to north and causing deforestation, especially illegal deforestation, because in the case of Amazon, if you have a farm in the Amazon biome, you can only deforest 20% of the area. But you can see many farms where there are more than 50 or 8% of the area deforested, what is completely illegal. And we have lost more than 20% of the Amazon forest because of the expansion of agriculture sector, not only cattle, but also soybean and the exploitation of timber products in the Amazon forest.
Well said. How does the production of textiles and garments impact water resources?
Yes, we have been doing some research on the productions of garment products and water resources, particularly in the case of the industry of jeans, the blue jeans. We have an important hub of productions of jeans in the northwest of Brazil, in states like Pernambuco, where there are large areas of the states where the dry season is very hard. There are few rivers. Water in general is not so available for the population in those areas. So at the same time, you have these productions of jeans using a lot of water, and this is an impactful situation for the population in those areas.
Well said. And Marcel, what in your view are some of the environmental consequences of using synthetic fibers in garment production?
Yeah, it's not one of our focus in our research in Repórter Brazil. What we have been doing in terms of environmental impacts is to investigate the cotton supply chain. Because Brazil, it's a major producer of cotton. We export a lot, even for Asia. And the cotton production in Brazil is completely associated with the extensive use of pesticides, causing contamination of water resource, forests, and also in some cities where we have large cotton plantations. We have been reporting some bad situations related to the cotton industry in the country.
Well said. What are some effective strategies for reducing environmental impact of the supply chains you are researching?
I think in Brazil, we have a strong legal framework. The legislation on forests is very well done. But what we see is some challenge to implement the legislation. For example, we have inspectors, environmental inspectors in the federal level, in the state level, in the municipality level, but it's not, they are not in enough number to be able to monitor and to find farmers, ranchers involved with illegalities. So we need in Brazil to increase the number of environmental inspectors to cover the illegalities, particularly illegal deforestation. We can see not only in the Amazon area, but in other biomes we have in Brazil, for example, the Cerrado, which is the Brazilian savannas.
So you just spoke about deforestation, Marcel, but there is also change of land use that is there. I know in my country, it's a big challenge. So I want to ask you, how do deforestation and land use change impact commodity supply chains?
Yeah, they are completely connected. In Brazil, it's like in India or in Paraguay as well. It's a country very close to Brazil. What we see is, particularly in the south of Brazil, the expansion of some crops. For example, the expansion of soybean plantations, corn plantations, cotton plantations, or even sugarcane for the production of ethanol and sugar. And the expansions of all these crops in the south or in the middle south of Brazil are pushing other industries into north, towards north. And that's causing strong deforestation, particularly the expansion of the cattle. Like 30 years ago, we had like only 20% of the Brazilian cattle herd based in the Amazon area. Nowadays, it's almost 50% located in the Amazon area. So, of course, to have all this cattle in the north, in the Amazon area, we needed to produce a lot of deforestation, most of them illegal deforestation, to receive the expansion of the cattle industry in that part of Brazil.
Very interesting. I have time for two more questions for you. How do you see the future of eco-friendly materials in the garment and textile industry?
Yeah, I think there are many initiatives to improve the sustainability of the garment sector. In Brazil, we have some ideas to improve the monitoring, the corporate policy, and discuss the kind of products that are produced by the industry and make available for the consumer. I think it's a very important solution to reduce the impacts against forest and people.
Wonderful. My last question, given all the research you do, Marcel, are there any successful examples of supply chains that you are happy about? And how transparent are these supply chains?
Yeah, I think in the garment sector, for example, since 2009, we have a multi-stakeholder agreement with companies, civil society, unions, the federal government in order to improve the corporate policies for monitoring the source of products in Brazil. So I think that we have a new certification for improving the controls in terms of sustainability of the production of garment products. So it's a good movement in my view. In the soybean sector, at least for Amazon, we have a kind of moratorium to reduce the soy trade within the Amazon area. Also, that was signed by companies many years ago. In the case of cattle, there is an important agreement signed by companies with the federal prosecutors. So most of them are voluntary norms. I think it's important. So we have been improving some aspects of the production in Brazil, but I think we need to move for a new strategy in the sense of having mandatory regulation for supply chains. There are some mandatory norms in other countries, like in France or in Germany. And in Brazil, we are starting to discuss how to build this mandatory norm for the supply chains, for the actors that participate of supply chains, in order that they will have to monitor and check the origin of the products that are available in the supply chains.
Well said. Marcel, on that note, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about so many different aspects of supply chains. I mean, you are obviously very knowledgeable about supply chains for commodities, for textiles and garments. But thank you so much for speaking to me both about the social impact and the environmental impact. Thank you again and good luck.
My pleasure, Ashutosh. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.